Hello and welcome to Cinema Chat with David Heath. I am your humble host, David Heath. And in this week's podcast, I have a really special one lined up. I will be interviewing Michael McGreevey, actor from, he's got a pretty long IMDb list, but he is known pretty well for being in some Disney films in the 60s and on into the 70s. And had a great conversation with Mike McGreevey, and I'm going to be playing that. And also, after the interview, I will be talking about Disney in general from 1960 to 64. We're going to detail all the movies, and we're going to talk about everything that came out between 1960 and 1964, from Zorro to Mary Poppins, and some good stuff about Mary Poppins. Anyway, I hope you enjoy listening to Michael McGreevey. He is a very, very nice gentleman, and he is got a lot of knowledge about Walt Disney. He had a chance to meet Walt Disney on more than one occasion, and we will talk about that. We'll also talk about the films that he appeared in, particularly the ones that he starred in, For the Love of Willadine and Sammy the Way Out Seal. But please, listen and enjoy. So I'm here with Michael McGreevey, star of, to my count, half a dozen Disney films, going back to the 60s on into the 70s. And Mike, I want to say thank you very much for coming on and talking to me about your experience with the Walt Disney Corporation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I look back on my experience with Disney with very positive feelings. It was always a pleasure, especially when Walt was still alive, when I started over there, to work at the Disney studios. It had a different feel than the other studios and or networks or production companies. It had a real family feel, and I always appreciated that.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that later in this, but let me go ahead and ask you now. I find it fascinating, though. It's not a good thing, but I find it fascinating that there's a really long list of child stars like yourself that went in a bad direction later in life, but the list is really short of all those Disney stars. They didn't have a tendency to get into trouble.
Yeah, no one's ever brought that up before. That's interesting. I was just talking to someone about Haley Mills the other day, and of course Kurt Russell is my best friend, and we're still best friends. And it's interesting, and I think the answer about the fact that the child stars that were under the Disney umbrella didn't go on to have a lot of problems, although there were a few. Tommy Kirk had some real issues at one point, but most of us, yeah. And I think it goes back to the fact that there was so much done at that studio with children. Mm-hmm. And that's why it was a different experience. Walt Disney, who wanted all of us kids to call him Uncle Walt, which is an interesting thing. I could never do that. I always called him Mr. Disney. But there was this feeling of protecting the children at that studio. It was very different. It was like Bill Mumy, who I did several things with there, who was on Lost in Space. Mm-hmm. Bill and I played brothers. Bill said to me not too long ago that he always felt safe at Disney, which is an interesting comment. And it was just because I think from the top, Walt Disney on down, everybody behaved like this is a family. And I felt that even as a young adult over there when I did all the work in my 20s and early 30s. Even though I wasn't a child anymore, I definitely felt that, well, it was all the same people, that number one, that this was a family. It was different, very different. And I think that's why the child actors that came out of there, like Evan Corcoran and Haley Mills and Kurt Russell, myself, that we had a more positive adulthood.
Yeah, it's really amazing to me because, when you see those child stars from the TV shows, and I mean, I don't have to tell you, you know all about it. Everybody, it's no secret. There's so many child stars that come out, and they don't get the big roles anymore, and they get older, and they get disillusioned. And I think that speaks to what Walt Disney was trying to create. I have to tell you off the top. I just watched one of your. It's not really it's not really a feature film. Even it was a Sammy the Way Out Seal.
Which was a feature film in all around the world.
How fun was that to film? I saw that for the first time in over 30 years yesterday.
That film, and I've said this many times, and Bill Mumy was in that, and Julian, and I, three youngsters. There was another person, Anne, who was discovered by Walt Disney. She turned out very well as an adult. But Sammy the Way Out Seal was probably, and Bill and I have talked about this many times, the most fun thing I ever did. I was about 12 or 13 years old. It was the first time I was paired with Billy, and we hit it off right away. He was an only child, and I was a middle child with two sisters, so I always wanted a brother, and he always wanted a big brother. And a marvelous director named Norman Tokar, who also wrote that teleplay, who directed all the Leave It to Beavers, like over 100 Leave It to Beavers. And he was one of those rare directors who loved to work with kids. He made you feel very secure, and it was a wonderful story, and just the most fun I ever had. The 4 weeks that went by, I mean, how many 12-year-olds get to swim with a seal for 4 days in a pool built on a soundstage at Walt Disney Studios? I mean, it was so much fun. To this day, that's the number one fan mail thing that I get from Disney stuff is from Sammy the Way Out Seal. Isn't that interesting? Because it's now, it's on all the streaming things, including Disney Plus, I think. And it's just one of those. Billy and I went to a theater, the Beverly, forget the name of it, in Hollywood, that's owned by Quentin Tarantino. And he had a print of the worldwide movie release that he did a Sunday matinee at his theater, and Billy and I went and introduced the movie, and I had not seen it in years, and it was so amazing, David. The kids, the place was filled with kids, obviously, and they all had free popcorn and candy, but this 1962 piece, these kids laughed at all the right places. It stood up. That movie stands up amazingly because, and like a lot of the Disney stuff, it is universal and it is everlasting, I think.
Yeah, and I felt that was a particularly nice film, and especially watching you, and you had really good chemistry with Bill, and of course he went on to have a really nice career for himself. When you were on that set,
and again, a kid actor who turned out terrific.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. When you were on that set, did you realize that you were on a set with some acting titans like Jack Carson? Did you realize what you?
That's the funny thing too. Both Bill Mumy and I and Kurt Russell, we always talk about, that we worked with some of these people. My God. I worked with, the first movie I did was with James Powell.
Yes.
The second movie I did was with Alan Ladd.
Yep.
The third movie I did was with Robert Ryan. It's like, when I got to film school, I went to film school at UCLA, I realized, my God, I got to actually work with these people that were in the books that we were reading about during the history of filmmaking, about American filmmaking. Jack Carson is the last thing Jack did, bless him. And I loved him. He was so wonderful and such a pro. And he wasn't feeling well at that point.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
And I later worked with his ex-wife, Lola Albright. I did a couple of movies with Lola, The Way West and Impossible Years. And I remember on The Way West, I said, I worked with your ex-husband, Jack. And she teared up. And she said, oh, God, he is my ex-husband, and he's gone, but I loved him so much. What was the experience? And she questioned me the whole time we were shooting Way West about my relationship with her ex-husband. And Jack was very special, and he really was. And then, of course, on that one, who was our father? Who was the famous?
Robert Culp.
Bob Culp.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Who had about as much business playing a father as, but he was an actor. And I remember that scene. There's a scene where the father chastises the boy when they get caught and the seal destroys everything. And I remember that scene where he chastises. It was too real. Billy and I really felt scared. Anyhow, it was funny. Years later, I was at one of these, the Hollywood show, one of these autograph shows, and Bob Culp was there, and I went up to him, and I said, we worked together, blah, 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 and I could tell he didn't remember. And then but he was being very nice. About half through, he went, oh, my God, the thing with the seal. Anyhow, he's wonderful in it, isn't he?
Yes, absolutely. I really enjoyed watching it.
Than anything he ever did, I think. But he was very good in it. And Patricia Berry played our mom, and she was delightful. And sweet Ann Jillian, who I later took to my senior prom.
Oh, lucky you.
Don't tell my wife. No, she knows.
Yeah, she was. You could tell she was going to be a total beauty. Yeah, that's kind of funny. And well, as far as Walt, as far as Walt himself, Walt Disney, what was it like talking with him? Did you get very many opportunities to just chat for a minute?
I was very lucky. And there was a formal sort of meeting the first time over there. Well, that wasn't the first time. I did a small part in a movie called Toby Tyler.
Yes.
Mainly because my agent said, it might be good if you take this part, Mike, because I think you might get some work over at Disney in the future.
Yeah.
So it worked out well. It was a little movie star.
Kevin Corcoran.
Yeah. Who later became a good friend, Kevin Corcoran, Moochie. And, but the second thing I did over there, which I guess was Sammy the Way Out Seal. No, I did a Texas John Slaughter in between. But anyhow, Mr. Disney, you when you started a thing over there, you went into his office, which they recreated now at the studio. I went there a couple years ago and had a real emotional sort of reunion in that room. He said, I'm glad to have you here. He was very welcoming and call me Uncle Walt and all that sort of stuff. And it was, it was nice but a little formal. And he was always around. He would come on the set every day. He might not talk to you, but he was always around. And Bill Mooney remembers that too, and so does Kurt and Ann. But then I guess it was on Sammy the Way Out Seal. That outside the commissary there were some ping pong tables, and at lunchtime I would eat very fast and go out. And the deal was there were 2 ping pong tables, and you would wait for the winner to win, and then you stepped in. And if you stayed, you won, then the next person came up against you. And I was a pretty good ping pong player, even at 12 years old. And one afternoon, I was out there, and I beat some guy, and he stepped aside, and the next guy stepped up, and I looked up, and it was Mr. Disney. Of course, my mother afterwards said, "I hope you'll let him beat you." And I said, "No, I didn't let him beat me, but he did beat me." But that was where we had most conversations, was during our ping pong contests. I never did beat him. Years later, I'm roommates with Kurt Russell. And one late night, we never talked about Disney that much, even though we were working at Disney together at the time. But never talked about Walt. And one night we started talking about Walt, and Kurt said, "Well, I used to play ping pong." I said, "So did I." And of course, Kurt said, I said, "I never beat him." And then Kurt said, "Well, I used to beat him all the time." So that's the difference. If you knew Kurt Russell, you'd understand that. But so yeah, I did get to have sort of a communication with the man. And I've said to other people, he was very much like that person who introduced the show on Sunday nights. At least to me, he was. Very warm, a little shy, I must say. And at times, we talked about, every once in a while, we would talk about what I was shooting. And, he really had some good insights into what a good story was, I realized very early in our conversations. And then years later, as a young adult, when I came back to the studio, and he was gone, I became very good friends with Ron Miller, his son-in-law, and with Diane Disney Miller, his daughter. And Diane always sort of confirmed for me what the person her dad was, and I was right about it. He was a great father, number one, for her, and he was just a great guy. He really was. And I know there's been things written about it, and nobody's perfect. And, but to me, in my memory, and it's the same memory that Bill Mooney has, the same memory that Kurt Russell has. I know Haley Mills has the same. Karen Dotress, who was in Mary Poppins, I've had conversations with her. We all love the guy.
Yeah, it seems as if that there's almost universal love for him. I know that you mentioned one name earlier that I felt like might be an exception. You mentioned Tommy Kirk. First of all, you never actually worked with him on a set, did you? Or
no, Tom and I never worked.
I didn't think so.
Tom, though, because we were at the studio together several times, and actually, Tom needed a chaperone on a publicity tour that I went with. That must have been Sammy the Way Out Seal, just a wonderful world of color. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. And my mom actually chaperoned him. With me, and someone else was with us. I forget who it was. It may have been Kevin Corcoran. But anyhow, Tom had some issues. He was a teenager. What a great young actor, number one he was. But he had some identity issues, I guess is the right term. And he was struggling with those as a teenager. And in defense of the Disney studios, they were very concerned, obviously, because of their image. but I think they were very protective of him and took care of him. I've never spoken with Tom. I have spoken with him, but I haven't never spoken about that. I saw him at some of those autograph shows, and he looks back on most of it very positively.
Oh, good.
His negative issues have nothing to do with the Disney studios.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was the life that he was living, and at a time when alternative lifestyles were not looked upon.
Right.
And but I think he now, at least the last time I saw him, he seemed like a very happy guy, and but no, we never worked together. I never worked with Annette, who I was madly in love with.
That was my next question, but yeah.
I'll tell you the Annette story. It's a great story. I think it was the Texas John Slatter. Only the second time I'm over at the studio, and I'm doing this Texas John Slatter episode, and I'm in the schoolhouse, which was a little red schoolhouse, little trailer, and I'm in there with all the other kids that were working there at the time, and I raised my hand and asked the teacher I wanted to go to the bathroom. So I left the little red schoolhouse and I went out to the restroom, which was right next to stage 4 there. And as I came back out of the restaurant, I passed, there was this really cool looking Ford Thunderbird, a purple Ford Thunderbird. This is like 1959, 1960, 1959.
Yeah.
A 58, 59, just primo Thunderbird, Ford Thunderbird, and I'm looking at it, and I realize it's the window's down. I can get in. My 9-year-old mind, I get in behind the wheel of this damn Thunderbird, and I'm pretending like I'm driving it, and I hear this voice say, "What are you doing in my car?" And I turn and look, and guess who? It's Annette Funicello. I was in love with her. I didn't know her, but I was in love with her because I'd watched the Mickey Mouse Club every day after school. And I turned, I'm sure, 85 shades of red. I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Annette." And she laughed. She was so Annette. She said, "It's okay." She said, "It's a cool car, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it really is." And she said, "Mr. Disney gave it to me for my birthday." And years later, bless her, I ran into her many times, and we did some publicity stuff together. Years later, I was back at the studio as a writer, and I was writing a TV movie that never got made, unfortunately, called Why? Because We Like You, which was about how the original Mouseketeers came to be. And I got to interview all the Mouseketeers, obviously. And the last person I interviewed was Annette. And I went up to her house in Encino, and she was so Annette. I mean, I think my wife was worried that I was going to run off with her. But the amazing thing that day is I was led into the house by the housekeeper, and I came into this, it was sort of a sunroom, and Annette was on the couch there in a beautiful dress, and we had this wonderful, and she remembered the incident of me sitting in the car, which was really funny. And then we finished. It's sort of an awkward moment with the interview for the movie. After about 2 hours, she had given me quite a bit of information, and I sort of said, "Well, I guess that's it." And she said, "Yeah," and she just stayed on the couch, and I sort of awkwardly said goodbye, and I walked myself out of the house. Years later, my dad, John McGreevey, who was a great writer, did the Annette Funicello story for ABC. And he called me up before he said, "I'm going to meet with Annette." And I said, "Well, please give my regards and my love, and blah, blah, blah." Dad came back from that meeting and called me. He said, "Annette sends her regards and wants me to tell you that the last time you saw her, that awkward moment was because she had just been diagnosed with the multiple sclerosis. It was fearful if she got up and walked me to the door that she would fall." broke my heart.
I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah. And she was, oh, man, she was something. She was the real deal, you know. And the great thing about someone like Annette Funicello is she never got full of herself. She was the real deal to the end, and obviously handled her illness with such class. Anyhow, I adored her. So,
well,
I think everybody did. Come on.
She was beautiful and seemed every bit a beautiful person, and I'm really glad that you're validating my thoughts on her. You went from being in a couple of a few features with Disney, and you went on to have a really successful TV career. I mean, this list: Lassie, Bonanza, Dr. Kildare, Wagon Train, Route 66, The Virginian. I mean, you were in practically every popular 60s show.
Yeah, I worked all the time. It was funny, a friend of mine on Facebook had sent me that I had done, there was a show called the Shirley Temple Storybook. That was with Shirley Temple, obviously. And it was in the 59, 60, 61. Wonderful show. And I had done an episode called Little Men. And it was a live on tape, you know, one broadcast thing. And I had never seen it. And it's now streaming on, I guess, Amazon Prime. I thought, yeah. My wife and I sat the other day and watched my 10-year-old self. And I have no memory of it other than meeting Shirley Temple, obviously. So we're sitting there watching this show and find out as the show progresses that I'm the villain. Which I'd forgotten. Anyhow. But yeah, I was very lucky. I worked a lot as a kid and as a young adult. Strangely enough, since we're talking about all the Disney stuff, I think my acting career sort of got dried up because of my association with Disney. In those days, back in the 60s, 70s, you could become a Disney type. And it happened to both myself and Kurt Russell. And Kurt broke out of it. He did a wonderful thing, the Elvis Presley thing for ABC, and sort of proved that he was not just a, quote, Disney actor.
And by the time he got to Escape from New York, he kind of escaped his...
well, he had met John, too, John Carpenter, who did the Disney movie, the Elvis movie. And then, yeah, they worked together on Escape to New York and numerous other great films. So he found that great director, too, that he could work with in John Carpenter. But I took advantage of it by something which I'd always wanted to do. I went to school at UCLA in film school, and my dad being a writer, I wanted to write and produce and direct television. So in my adult times, I had a good 30-year run as a writer, producer, director. But the acting was always my first love.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, another one that I remember very vividly that I've seen at least half a dozen times is The Computer That Wore Tennis Shoes. And that movie just cracks me up on so many levels. It always makes me smile when I watch it.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that movie is that it was not intended to be a movie.
Oh, is that?
It was called Something's Happened to Dexter. It was going to be a two-part Sunday night, Wonderful World of Color, two-parter.
They stretched it out and made it work.
When we finished it, everybody liked it so much, somebody said, let's just release it as a movie. And that's the only time in my career I'll never forget it. I got a call from my agent saying, I've got good news. And I said, what? He said, good news for both of us, because he was going to get his 10% again. They had to pay pay us over again because they were releasing it as a movie. That was the SAG contract. So I got paid twice for that film. And it is a cute film.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun. And you were...
It was one of those magical things. All three of those movies, the Midfield trilogy, they call it now. That one, Now You See Him, Now You Don't, Strongest Man in the World. It had that magic of bringing together people. Bob Butler was the director on two of them. Joseph McAvity wrote all three. And we had Kurt, myself, obviously Joe Flynn, hysterically funny. It was just one of those things that clicked. And I think we knew at the time, even on the first one, which was just a TV show, we sort of knew it was good. And I remember seeing it for the first time in a theater. I went to, it was just in the valley out here in North Hollywood. I hadn't seen it, so I wanted to see it. So I went by myself one evening to see Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, and I couldn't believe the audience reaction, especially towards the end. It was perfect. It was amazing. So it's a fun movie. Still is. It's on Disney Plus right now.
That's right. Do you know, the funny thing is, Mike, that was the first movie I got Disney Plus right away, like millions of other people, and the very first thing I watched was The Computer That Wore Tennis Shoes. And
now, how old are you? Did you see it?
I'm 49, so I did not see it in the movie theater. But I caught the second wave of Disney movies on the old style Disney Channel back when they were playing real Disney stuff, back then, and in the 80s. I think it started around 84 or something.
Right. That's my kids got to see all my stuff on the original Disney Channel.
Yep.
Remember?
Yep.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's how I probably wouldn't know who you are if it weren't for the Disney Channel. I saw For the Love of Willadine, and I saw Sammy the Way Out Seal, and had I not been exposed to those movies on the Disney Channel, I don't know that I would have wanted to watch them on Disney Plus. So,
right.
Yeah. So
those were all fun. They were fun experiences for me. There is something magical about the Disney stamp. It was very hard I know because I was there in the 70s after his death, that all the people that were left behind, who had all come up with him, obviously, and been trained by him, they wanted to continue the legacy, and it was tough without his leadership, I think. A lot of people struggled with it, but somehow it's endured, and they had, they re-upped it in the late 80s and 90s, and the animation came back, and it's still magical, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely something to it. Going back toward the end of your time at Disney, if I'm not mistaken, your last film was the Shaggy DA. Is that right?
Yeah.
Last film with Disney, that is. And what do you remember working with Dean Jones and Cesar Romero? My goodness, and Jim Backus.
Yeah, no. Caesar was in all three of the Medfield comedies.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Caesar was A.J. Arnold. He was the best.
Yes.
With Dick Bacallion as his sidekick. Actually, I had worked with Caesar when I was a little kid, years before that, and he had remembered it amazingly. Caesar was terrific. And my God, you had to prod him, but we all tried to get him to talk about, my God, what a career this guy had, and he knew everybody in the great Hollywood era, and just a wonderful guy. I really loved Caesar. I was a smoker at the time, and he tried like mad, especially on the last one, Strongest Man in the World, to get me to stop smoking. I wasn't able to do it at that point. I have stopped smoking years ago. He was just a dear, sweet man and a very good actor, and kind. I would use the word kind. Dean Jones, underrated is the term I would use. Dean, I did Snowball Express with Dean, and the last one, Shaggy D.A. with Dean. He worked so hard to make it look easy. And when we were doing Snowball Express, he was sort of in a down area in his life.
That's right.
And he found God. He found a wonderful woman to begin with, who converted him to Christianity, and he turned his life around. And by the time we got to Shaggy D.A., he was making us all sing spiritual songs on the set. But Dean was a great guy, and like I said, not appreciated enough for his talent. Again, he made all those movies. I've watched enough of them now, all the Love Bugs, and he made it so watchable because of his talent and the way he Snowball Express, he's wonderful in that movie, and he's not appreciated because he just sort of makes it look easy, you know.
Yeah, there's one guy that wait a minute, did I miss something? Did you also work with Tim Conway once?
No, never worked with Tim. I love Tim Conway.
Oh, you met him though?
Huh?
You met him though?
Oh yeah, I knew him through a couple of way back as a kid. I was on a series at at Universal called Riverboat. And everybody on a series at the time had to do looping, ADR work, voice work, and you would wait in the outer room as everybody sort of lined up from all the different series. And my mom and I met him. He was doing McHale's Navy at the time.
Oh boy, fun.
We met him in the waiting room of the looping stage, and I kept running into him over the years. He was one of the funniest human beings that ever lived. And I knew him through, obviously, he and Joe Flynn had done McHale's Navy together, and Joe socially kept in contact with Tim. So I saw Tim a lot at parties at Joe's house, and then years later, I met Tim Conway Jr. He had an office in an office building where I was doing a show, and I became friends with Junior, and Tim would come by and visit with his son and come by and see me too. So.
Oh, that's great. Did you ever meet Don Knotts as well? Or?
I did meet Don when they were doing what was the one they did? Hot Lead, Cold.
Yeah, they did Apple Dumpling Gang, 2 of them, and with Disney, and then they did 2 more that weren't Disney features.
Right.
They were in a total of 4 movies together, though, and
yeah,
they never.
I actually met them. I was over at Disney doing some voice work, and Tim came to my table in the commissary, and he was with Don, and they did about 10 minutes of a comedy routine for me. That's how those guys were. But I didn't know Don Knotts well, but admired him, obviously.
Yeah, those are 2 other veterans.
Tim was in Shaggy D.A., but we were in no...
that's right. That's where I got the impression. I was thinking...
Yeah, we didn't have any scenes together, but, that was another place where we met up and talked. And I think we even talked about the looping stage. Yeah, we did at that point. But again, I think Tim Conway, for me anyhow, was the funniest human being I ever met. Just naturally funny.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of those people that when he passed, I shed tears because I felt like I knew him. I never met him, but I felt like I knew him. And speaking of that's a segue. And one inevitable question I want to ask is, where were you and what were your feelings when you heard about Walt Disney passing?
Actually, I remember it very well. I was a freshman at the University of Santa Clara in Northern California. I was there for my freshman year. I transferred to UCLA after that, but and I had just finished a test. I remember it was the end of the quarter before we were going to go off for Christmas break. We were taking our finals. And I walked back up into my residence hall there, and the priest this was a Catholic university, the priest that was our proctor on our floor was standing in the hallway as I came up, and he knew my background, and he said, "Oh, I'm glad I caught you, Mike." And I said, "What?" And he said, I just heard that Walt Disney passed away, and I didn't want you to hear it, just on the radio or whatever. And I said, "Well, thank you, Father." And I remember going into my room and crying. My wife and I have gone several times to the Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've had that.
No, I have not. No.
I recommend it to you. Mm-hmm. And as you go through this wonderful museum, they sort of guide you around, and as you come towards the end, they talk about the final days. And boy, the first time I went through that again, I didn't expect it. I was really, really very emotional. And I didn't know him that well, obviously, but it just, and we had gone to the Family Museum and had lunch with Ron Miller, who had just lost Diane Disney. So that was a tough lunch, too. I think the impact this guy, and he died so young, that's what's so awful.
Right.
And then, see, not long after that, a couple of years later, I was back at the studio doing work, I think the first one was Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, and he was gone, and it was very different, and you could tell, as I said to you, they were all trying so hard to keep the legacy alive because they knew how important that was, but they were missing that leadership. They were missing him. His brother Roy was still alive at that point, but Roy was more of the businessman. Mm-hmm. So the creative force that was Walt Disney was gone, and but the other time, and I alluded to it earlier, I went back just a couple of years ago. They restored the office in the animation building at the studio. His office, both offices. He had an inner office too, and I went to have lunch with the archive people, and then we said, "Let's go up and look at the office." Blah blah blah, and I went. And I'm not thinking anything, and I walk into the first office, and the moment I walked in, man, it hit me. I got so emotional, and I was sort of embarrassed. And the archive lady, what's her name, terrific gal, she said, "It's okay, Mike." I said, I'm sorry. And she said, no, it's okay. Haley Mills was here 2 weeks ago and broke down sobbing. I said, "Isn't that weird? I don't know. None of us knew this guy that well, but there's something about being there again. And it brought back my memories of of connecting with him, on a personal level.
Yeah, he affected so many people, not just on the set or people that worked for him, but there's literally millions of people that never met the gentleman, but they had an emotional attachment to him. And
I've done some of these Disney fan things, and you're so right. I mean, some people are. And it's nice that, I'm Karen Dotris and I have talked about this. We were at a thing in January. She was very close to Walt, much closer than I ever got. He adored her. He adored her. He adored Haley, obviously. We all did. He adored Annette. And he really loved Kevin Corcoran, Moochie, too. And those kids had a special connection with Uncle Walt. The rest of us all had some connection too. Roger Mobley, Bill Mooney tells a lovely story about being called up to the office and Walt saying, "How's it going?" to him, and Billy said, "Fine, Mr. Disney." And he said, "Well, what I really want to know, Billy, is are you having fun?"
Oh,
yeah, I just love that. But yeah, we all had a connection with him in some way, and I guess, I wasn't totally aware of it until I walked into that office again, and he wasn't there. I guess that was the other part of it. It definitely has an impact on the whole world. And when you go to, my wife and I love to go to Disneyland, and that's the one thing we're really missing during the pandemic. Thank God we got to go for my birthday in February.
uh-huh.
You really sense the impact that this one man, just one guy,
Yep.
had on the whole friggin' world.
Yep.
It's amazing. I've gone to these D23 things too, these conventions with the fans, and they're really devoted to everything that Walt Disney stood for.
Yeah, that's amazing. What ultimately does he mean to you?
I think, and this was all unconscious, I think I took away from it my experience at Disney and with him, a really strong appreciation for hard work and dedication and good filmmaking and being, a responsible artist. That good work, pays off in ways that you don't even imagine. The one thing, as a 72-year-old man, which is weird for me to say, to sit here and be talking about Sammy the Man and to have people still watching it, that's really something for me. I didn't expect that to happen, and I think that can only happen. I've had that experience with several things, but all the Disney stuff, obviously, it really is amazing to me. I was also fortunate later in life to work on the Waltons, both as an actor and a writer, and that is a legacy that to this day, people still, and it's on television every day. So I've been lucky from that standpoint. I think what I learned from Mr. Disney was just dedication to your work. And he sort of required that of you. Now that I think about it, I've never thought about this before.
Yeah, kind of like a really good boss, somebody that gets the best out of you. You're still smiling.
It's like we're all in this together. I hope you're doing a good job. And I sort of got that feel. I must say, I probably got that from the ping pong time. because we did actually talk about movies and stuff when we which was really interesting that this adult man who ran his studio and had Disneyland and all is talking to me about movies, as a 12-year-old. But that was the other thing. I don't think he saw everybody pretty much the same, and in talking to the other kids, that was their experience too.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Mike, I am so glad, and you're a big breath of fresh air when you see how someone can progress in life and come out of that childhood stardom that we talk about, and someone seeming so well balanced and very grateful of what you went through. It's a really beautiful thing to be able to talk with you and hear your pleasant memories.
Oh, thank you, David. That makes me feel good. I attribute most of my success to my parents. So.
They almost always will have a great deal to do with that.
They were great.
So, McGreevey, for coming on and talking with us about his experience on the Disney sets. Nice interview. And Mike McGreevey, very nice man, nice gentleman, appreciate it. For the next segment in the show, in this Marathon Disney podcast, the Cinema Chat with David Heath, we are going to talk about Disney from 1960 to 64, and we're going to detail each Disney film, well, at least mention each Disney film that came out. But first, what else was going on in the world of Disney? Well, Disneyland was booming in 1960. Even Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, wanted to be a part of what was going on, and he wanted to visit Disneyland. Walt actually denied him. However, couldn't be denied that an empire was being built. Disney was humongous. Walt Disney was in a humongous amount of debt 2 decades before. And now he is embarking upon a time where they were just a factory, Disney was. He and Roy had built themselves a huge company with movies and TV shows. The Mickey Mouse Club was canceled in 1960, and with all the originals still being on there. However, Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color was on TV on prime time, and because of the fact that it was color, it was a big deal in 1960. The very beginning stages of Walt Disney World in Orlando was coming about too. Although it was still a decade before the opening day, it was coming about. Well, let's talk about the films. We'll start with Zorro, 1959, and there was a Zorro TV series, and that series had 78 episodes, and but there was a movie that was on the Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. Got to make a certain say it right. It was called The Sign of Zorro, and it was about. It starred the swashbuckling star Guy Williams in the title role. It was his only Disney contribution, was the 78 episodes of the Zorro series and this movie. It also starred TV star Henry Calvin, kind of a Oliver Hardy type. The Sign of Zorro is a fun movie, But ultimately, if you really want to watch Zorro, watch the Doug Fairbanks version. But it is in color, and it is fun. There's a movie in 1960 called 10 Who Dared. Starred Brian Keith. It was set in 1869. A group of men went down the Colorado River, and they thought it would be a good idea to go from one end to the other, and they were the first people to do it. It was not a really great movie, though. As a matter of fact, Leonard Maltin was quoted in his review book saying it's rock bottom Disney. Yikes. Also in 1959, there's a film called Kidnapped. It was directed by Robert Stevenson, and you're going to find a lot of Disney films for a couple of decades were directed by Robert Stevenson. Kidnapped starred James MacArthur. Took place in 18th century Scotland, and he's shanghaied, and it depicts his journey on the ship. The film also stars Peter Finch, who would later go on to win an Oscar for his role in the movie Network. And also look for Peter O'Toole in the film. This was followed up by Pollyanna in 1960. This was the Disney debut for Haley Mills. She was 13 when she was filming it, and Pollyanna to me is an excellent film. It also stars Jane Wyman, Carl Malden. Jane Wyman is the aunt and now kind of the adoptive mother of Pollyanna, and Carl Malden is the fiery preacher. Kevin Corcoran is Jimmy, Pollyanna's friend. And you can also look for a big scene with Agnes Moorehead, whom you would see later in the decade in Bewitched as Endora. This film also is one of a few featuring Rita Shaw. And Rita Shaw is the gray-haired lady that looks a lot older than she really is. The first thing I think about when I think of Rita Shaw is her appearance in The Ghost of Mr. Chicken with Don Knotts. So, attaboy, Luther. But anyway, the film also stars Pollyanna stars Edward Platt and Nancy Olson, who has carved out a 66-year career and is still with us at 92 years old. Pollyanna's parents have died, and her rich aunt takes over parental duties, and she's extremely strict. She doesn't allow for things like children expressing themselves or being happy. This is not a child's place. And so that's according to her. Pollyanna is played perfectly by Haley Mills. She plays a sweet girl that loves everything and sees the good in she loves everyone and sees the good in everything, I should say. And I almost wonder if Haley Mills is just being herself in the film. I have a feeling she was. But it's set in the early 1900s. The film was a remake. It was a successful Mary Pickford venture in 1920. See that one too. Some people might be turned off by the utter sweetness and sugary feeling of the film, but I think it's the best Disney film, or live action anyway, to date. And later that year, another film would come out named Toby Tyler. And this one stars little Kevin Corcoran in the title role. He's a little boy who joins the circus, and Bob Sweeney plays a manager in the circus. He has the most memorable role, really. He tries to screw over poor Toby more than once takes more of his money, more of his earnings than he's supposed to. Henry Calvin appears again. This time he plays a worker that really has no use for Toby, but isn't going to let Toby get used by the manager of the circus. There's really some fun moments in this movie, but overall, it's nothing great here. It's almost like it's a really good way to spend an hour and a half if you got the time, but it's just okay. This film was followed up by another called Swiss Family Robinson. This film starred John Mills, father of Haley Mills, and Dorothy McGuire, and Tommy Kirk, and then Kevin Corcoran again, and James MacArthur. It's a warm film with comedy, drama, and a little bit of action. And some of the action's a little hard to believe, but I'll let you be the judge when you see the end where a little family goes up against a bunch of pirates. How does a little family win? I'm not sure, but there's about a shipwreck on. There are families on, and the shipwrecks, and the family just tries to make the best of things. Janet Monroe is in the film too, and she is positively lovely. I'm a fan of Janet Monroe, I have to say. This film, Swiss Family Robinson, scores 84% on Rotten Tomatoes. It brought in $40 million, which was 10 times the $4 million budget. Let's see. The next film that we'll talk about is called Greyfriars Bobby. And it's about a Skye Terrier and an old man that the dog truly loves. It came out in 1961. Very heartwarming film. Stars Lawrence Naismith and Donald Crisp. And that is probably worth your time. Babes in Toyland was the next one, and this one is a tough one to crack. Annette Funicello and Tommy Sands star in it, and it's a musical. And it's... I'm going to be brutally honest. My mom's going to get mad at me for hearing this, but it's mostly really bad. I remember liking it when I was a child, and when I saw it, when I rewatched it just recently, I thought, this is absolutely horrible. It had bad reviews, too, as I looked things up. Annette Funicello is lovely in the film. There's nothing wrong with her. In fact, there's really nothing wrong with most of the players in the film. Ray Bolger... just you could tell was having a blast in his role as the evil Barnaby. I mean, Ray Bolger is such a nice man, and probably never really got a chance to play an evil guy on the stage or the screen, and it's fun watching him. He's really great. Henry Calvin and Gene Sheldon also star in the film, and they play a Laurel and Hardy type couple here. They are actually on Barnaby's side, whereas in the original Babes in Toyland from 1934, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were against Barnaby, but in this one they're kind of on his side. And but they are fun. Talking about Henry Calvin and Gene Sheldon, and they are lovely, but they don't duplicate the real thing. It's not nearly the same. Both starred in the same three Disney films. This is just a curious fact. Both starred in same Disney films, and went on to have a few roles on TV after this. Gene Sheldon was a true talent and a mime artist. He died in 1982. He was 74. Henry Calvin was a gifted singer and an excellent comic actor. As a matter of fact, it sounds very familiar, just like Oliver Hardy, gifted singer, excellent comic actor. He would later play on Dick Van Dyke's show, and he impersonated Oliver Hardy, while Dick Van Dyke impersonated Stan Laurel. And in this scene, they were not even pretending like they were just doing an impression of the two. They were doing it. He died in 1975, talking about Henry Calvin, and he was only 51. and he died at the same age as Oliver Hardy, and oddly, Gene Sheldon died at the same age as Stan Laurel died. I'm sorry, I said Henry Calvin was 51. He was 57, the same age as Oliver Hardy, and Gene Sheldon died at age 74, the same as Stan Laurel. So it's a lot of curious similarities, and you see the two together on the screen. They look like the same guys, but. Ed Wynn stars in the film. Well, doesn't star, but he's got a scene in the film as the toy maker. An absolutely wonderful performance. Ed Wynn is so great. Here's a quote by Tommy Kirk about working with Ed Wynn. I thought he was delightful, and so did everyone else. You could not like him. He was completely crazy. It was just as crazy off screen as he was on. But it was all, of course, an act. He was a very serious religious man in his own way, but he loved playing Ed Wynn, the perfect fool, the complete nut. And he was good at it. Actually, I think the movie is sort of a clunker, especially when I compare it to the Laurel and Hardy Babes in Toyland. It's not a great film, but it has a few cute moments. It's an oddity, but I'm not embarrassed about it like I am about some other movies I've made, unquote, from Tommy Kirk. And I agree with him. Laurel Hardy's version is much better, although those songs are potentially far worse in that version than they are to the ears in the 1961 version. Walt was trying to make actually an animated feature out of this at first, but tabled it a decade earlier and then decided to make it into a live-action film. I'm going to tell you, I really want to like this film. I do love some of the individual performances. It's got a pile of good performances, but the film was just bloated with bad songs and a generally mindless script and silly dance numbers. But it really is fun to watch Ray Bolger as the bad guy, I should say, and there are some good performances. And this is a salvageable film, but it's just like, why do they make it so long? Why do they have all those silly songs in it? Would have been better with less songs, let's put it that way, and a better script. Let's see, the next film I'm not going to say a bad thing about. It is called The Parent Trap. And who wouldn't like The Parent Trap? Well, it stars Haley Mills as twins, Susan and Sharon, and they were separated by their parents due to the breakup of their marriage. The two girls meet at summer camp, coincidentally, after being separated on different sides of the country, and they each didn't know the other existed. Well, Brian Keith plays the dad, and the lovely Maureen O'Hara plays the mom. And this is just a truly unhateable film. You can't not love this film. But the parents are reunited, and it's awkward because the dad is now engaged to someone else. And it's just a sweet movie. It also features Joanna Barnes, who had a very, very long TV career, and famous star Una Merkel, who was a star during the silent film days. The great Leo Carroll, who we talked about in this podcast before, is in the film too as a humorous role, and a humorous role as the Reverend. Leo Carroll had a long film career, a character actor, often played a comedic type, but just fun role for him. And Nancy Culp, who you might know as Jane Hathaway or Miss Hathaway or Miss Jane, whatever you want to call her, in the Beverly Hillbillies. She was called all of them in the TV show. The real star of this is Haley Mills, though. The Parent Trap, who plays Susan and Sharon. She performs at an extremely high level And unlike Pollyanna, she's really playing two different kinds of girls in this. So it took a lot of skill to do this for a young lady like Haley Mills. But this film makes it impossible for you not to like Haley Mills, in my opinion. If you don't like Haley Mills, you probably are just a miserable person. I don't know how you couldn't love Haley Mills, but this was a much more devious role for her. And if you've seen the film, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, who are you anyway? No, go watch The Parent Trap. And if you saw it a long time ago when you were a kid, watch it again. It's fun. Of course, famously, it features the song Together. And I know I'm not going to sing it, but what a fun movie, and that's a great song. Let's see. The next one we're going to talk about is another really good one, Absent-Minded Professor, 1961, directed by Robert Stevenson. It stars Fred MacMurray, Nancy Olson, Tommy Kirk, Keenan Wynn, Ed Wynn as the fire chief, which is so great because that's how he gained his fame, by playing the fire chief on the radio. It also stars Raymond Bailey, who played Mr. Drysdale in the Beverly Hillbillies. How interesting is that? Well, let's talk about this movie, The Absent-Minded Professor. Basically, Professor Brainerd really is absent-minded. He keeps forgetting that he's supposed to get married. He misses his wedding ceremony an unprecedented 3 times. And finally, she decides, this is it. I'm not doing this anymore. But she does forgive him, and they end up getting married. But it's just, this is a fun movie because, yeah, he is smart, but he is absent-minded, and he's got his mind on other things at all times. And Fred MacMurray plays this role so well. And I know later in life, and even in this time, I know Fred MacMurray somewhat regretted his Disney persona and his My Three Sons persona, but he was just so darn likable, And as great as he is in the movie Double Indemnity, I think the takeaway from Double Indemnity is that it is a great film, but Fred MacMurray's persona is still stuck with Disney and with My Three Sons, because he's just so easy to like in these roles. Of course, if you've seen this before, you know the basketball scene is hilarious, or should I say hilarious. No, they are. These guys are jumping high, and they are great. It's a crazy scene, and you have to see it if you haven't seen it. The Absent-Minded Professor. I think it's far superior to the film Flubber that came out 4 decades later, starring Robin Williams, which we'll talk about in the future podcast. But The Absent-Minded Professor, one of my favorites of, if you want to compare it to The Shaggy Dog, which also had Fred MacMurray, and it looks like they're in the exact same house. I'm not sure. But I think this compares favorably to Shaggy Dog, which I think is a really fun movie. I would give Absent-Minded Professor reluctantly 3 3/4 stars. How about that? There's such thing really, but whatever. This is what I'm going to give it. 101 Dalmatians is the next film, and as you probably are aware, this was an animated feature. Came out in 1961. Made $300 million. This was a huge boost to Disney, and this funded future films. And Walt said, you don't make movies to get rich. You make movies so you can make more movies. That was Walt. But this 101 Dalmatians is about a man and a woman who have in common that they both have a Dalmatian for a pet, and they get married, and then their dogs, of course, got married too. Obviously, they got coupled together, and then they had puppies, and a lot of puppies. And as it turns out, there were 101 Dalmatians in their house. That's the name. They are a happy family, except for this bad woman named Cruella de Vil, and she steals the 99 puppies.
My only true love, darling. I live for furs. I worship furs.
Not a nice lady, but Rod Taylor plays the voice of Pongo, the male Dalmatian, known for Rod Taylor is known for The Birds. He has a long IMDb list, but he was mostly known for The Birds, the Alfred Hitchcock film, and he died in 2015, and he was 84 years old. Kate Bauer played the voice of Perdita, the female Dalmatian, and this was really her only major role in acting. However, she is still with us, and she is 98 years old now. Ben Wright played Roger, the husband. He's a songwriter and source of the songs in the film. He was a radio, TV, and film star, and matter of fact, he was in The Sound of Music. He died in 1989. He was 74 years old. Lisa Davis played the role of Anita, the wife. She had lots of minor roles for 20 years. She is also still with us, and she is 84 years old. Betty Lou Gerson played the role of the villainous Cruella de Vil. And no, I'm not going to sing that song. Listed as a Disney legend for being in Cinderella and later Mary Poppins, and of course the role of Cruella. She died in 1999 at the age of 84. But I definitely would rate 101 Dalmatians highly. I really enjoy it. If you watched it once as a kid, watch it again as an adult. Let's see, the next film we're going to talk about is The Legend of Lobo, which depicts the life of a wolf. It's narrated by Rex Allen, who is really known for his narrations. That's really about all he did almost, was narrations. Probably one of the most famous ones he did was Charlotte's Web about 13 years later. Kind of a fun movie, but mostly just forgettable. Almost Angels is another movie that came out in '61, and that is a group of about a group of boys in the Vienna Boys Choir, and details their triumphs. Next, we're going to talk fairly extensively about Sammy the Way-Out Seal. I'd like to honor my podcast guest one more time, Michael McGreevey. If you're still listening to the show, I really definitely enjoyed Sammy the Way-Out Seal, and Mike McGreevey's performance is fun. He gets a chance to showcase his talent and be the star of the film. It premiered on the Magical World of Disney in 1962. It was just a fun movie. And of course, like I said, it starred Michael McGreevey, our podcast guest, and also Bill Mumy, who you would recognize instantly from Lost in Space, the first of two films that these two would play as big brother and little brother of each other. It also has Robert Culp, who was just a truly great actor, and you would know him from I Spy, the TV show, and he also played the Colombo Killer more than once film also stars Patricia Barry, 145 credits to her name, and Elizabeth Fraser, who has 93 credits to her name. Future star Ann Gillian is in the film, and legendary actor Jack Carson is in the film. And I talked with Michael McGreevey about working with Jack Carson, and you know, the amount of legend that was in this movie is pretty stunning. But there's some really great scenes, and one is involving the swimming pool scene. Sammy the seal comes out and wreaks havoc on the party crowd that's there at the home. And then there's the grocery store scene, which is even better in my opinion. But thanks again to the gracious Michael McGreevey. Michael McGreevey is a true gentleman, and I really appreciated his appearance on the show. And we'll talk more about one more of his later. But first, let's see. The next film is In Search of the Castaways, 1962. $21 million budget, again directed by Robert Stevenson. Haley Mills in her third of 6 roles for Walt Disney, and it also stars Maurice Chevalier, famous singer and actor. It stars George Sanders, who you might recognize from Samson and Delilah and All About Eve. It also has Wilfred Hyde, who plays Lord Glenarvan. And he often played butler roles and sometimes very distinguished roles. And he has 167 credits to his name. But he was in movies and TV for a long time. Fun film. Talking about In Search of the Castaways, about a search expedition in South America. Sort of a comedy drama. I would say this is probably the third best Haley Mills film. No, fourth best. I'll call it fourth best of the 6 that she's in for Disney. Let's call it the fourth best. Moon Pilot is the next film, 1962, directed by James Nielsen. Stars Tom Tryon, Brian Keith, Tommy Kirk appears, Nancy Culp appears again in a Disney film. Look close for Sally Field as a beatnik girl role. Okay, but if you like this movie, Moon Pilot, you're probably going to like it because of Dani Saval. She is a French actress. She was the best reason to watch this. She does play a really good role. And if you're going to watch this movie, that's what you're going to enjoy the most. Tom Tryon is dealing with Dani Saval's character, who is an alien. She plays an alien. Should be more of a fun film, but it does kind of drag anytime she's not on the screen. Talking about Dani Saval, and I hope I'm saying her name right. Someone will probably correct me. Big Red is the next film. It's about a red dog that a little boy grooms with the help of an older man played by Walter Pidgeon. It's directed by Norman Toker. First of a long list of films for him that goes on into the late 70s. Big Red was filmed in Quebec. The problem is it lacks the emotionality of Old Yeller, and but I will say there's something about Walt Disney and animals. He sure liked to make movies about dogs. That's definitively true. Well, this was followed up by sort of a fun film called Bon Voyage, and let's see. This stars Fred MacMurray, Jane Wyman, Tommy Kirk, Kevin Corcoran, and the very beautiful Deborah Wally. The misadventures of a family on a cruise ship I suppose. Well, let's put it this way. There's a lot of really fun scenes, particularly the Fred McMurray drinking scene is very funny. And one other fun scene involves Fred McMurray when his daughter, Deborah Wally, walks onto the beach with a swimsuit that he's not real happy with. The film is G-rated, like every Disney film for a very long time, but it does have a swear word, oddly enough. You'll have to listen for it. The real question about Bon Voyage is, why is it 2 hours and 10 minutes? I don't understand that. Well, it's directed by James Nielsen, which won't be his first lengthy Disney film. But this movie lost money at the box office. I do consider it fun, but I just think it's a little too long, or maybe even a lot too long. It would have been great as an hour and 35-minute film. Definitely watch for the Fred McMurray getting drunk scene. Though Son of Flubber, it also stars Fred McMurray, and he's back as Professor Brainerd. This is one of the early Disney sequels. But unlike a lot of sequels, this film did really well. It scored 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it made $22 million, which was really good money against the budget at the time. Professor Brainerd has his flubber innovation stolen, and basically stolen by the government. And now his household is in debt. And also, in the larger scheme of things, Medfield College is in debt to Alonzo Hawk, played by Keenan Wynn. And Hawk wants to close down the school. Now, like the Absent-Minded Professor, Son of Flubber has a really, truly great scene too. That one was basketball. This one's football, and oh my goodness, it's just priceless. You'll have to watch it. But the principals are all back in this film. Fred McMurray, Nancy Olson, Tommy Kirk, and Ed Wynn. And Ed Wynn is funny in it again, of course. When is Ed Wynn not funny? Well, the answer is never. But Paul Lynde, look for him. Yeah, he's really easy to find. He is the PA announcer at the football game. But also look for William Demarest, who played Uncle Charlie in My Three Sons. And also look for Jack Albertson, who appeared in the first one and in this one. Well, next we have another sequel, and this is one of those moments where you're going, why did this get made? I don't understand why they did this. Why did they do this? They took Old Yeller, which is truly a great movie. In my opinion, 4-star film. One of the 3 or 4 best live-action Disney films ever, and I don't know if it's even debated by anybody. But then they roughed it up by making this really horrible movie called Savage Sam, and I might be going a little over the top by calling it horrible, but it's just, the film has nothing to do with Old Yeller. It does have Tommy Kirk, and it does have Kevin Corcoran returning in their roles as Big Brother and Little Brother. Brian Keith is also in the movie, and I find it interesting, and I'm going to make Brian Keith fans really upset by saying this, but I find it really interesting that any movie that's not called The Parent Trap, Brian Keith seems to just kind of walk through any of the Disney movies. I think he did a really great job in The Parent Trap, and his role is so fantastic in that. But the other Disney movies he's in, I feel like he's just kind of going through it, not really worried about putting on a great performance, just cashing in a check. That's just my thought, my opinion, and there it is. So go ahead and get mad at me. But this movie, Savage Sam, spoiler alert, ends in a battle involving Comanches and Apaches, and this movie isn't fun or isn't touching like Old Yeller was. The other guy, I think, gets 4 stars. Savage Sam, 1 star. I just don't like it. I just don't understand why this got made. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But everybody's entitled to mistakes, and Walt definitely made one here. But the next movie was very good. It's called The Miracle of the White Stallions. It was directed by one of my favorite directors, Arthur Hillard, who would go on and direct many films in the later 60s and on into the 70s. And I love his IMDb. So we won't go through all of it on this already lengthy podcast. But it also stars Robert Taylor, Lily Palmer, Eddie Albert. It's called Miracle of the White Stallions. It's a very compelling story about an Australian colonel that is in charge of a purebred stallion group, and they choose to shun Hitler and the Nazis. When they start to realize why the Nazis are bad, they leave, and they try to secure assistance from General Patton. You might recognize that name, but they try to get help from the U.S. government so they can save the horses and save the show. And this show was made $2.5 million, which was more than the budget. It's a good film, definitely worth a watch, and you probably haven't seen it, so check that out. And some of the movies that I am talking about on here are available on Disney Plus. Most of them are, but what I found is some are not available on Disney Plus, but they are available on YouTube. Some for purchase, some free. Check them out if you can. The next movie is Summer Magic, which starred Haley Mills as Nancy, and Dorothy McGuire as Margaret, and Deborah Wally as the snobby cousin Julia. Burl Ives plays the kindly older gentleman that helped Nancy and Margaret, and it also stars Eddie Hodges as Haley Mills' love interest. And this film also does have Una Merkel, the silent screen actress, and the film is basically about Margaret is now widowed, and she and Nancy, Haley Mills, have to live on less money. And this film is directed by James Nielsen, and once again, a movie that's a little too long. It's only an hour and 50 minutes, but it's like, come on, this could be an hour and 30. You could do this. Do a little bit of editing, get it done. But Burl Ives is fun in the film. He plays Osh Popham, who plays he helps the ladies on with a house that doesn't belong to him, and eventually that comes home to roost. But there was a lot to, or there was a lot to the movie, but it's just a little too long. They were thinking about. Walt Disney was thinking about putting Haley Mills in a situation with a screen kiss in this movie, but ultimately they decided against it. There are several musical numbers, but they're very forgettable, and I think that's what ultimately could shorten the film. But in my opinion, it was one of the weaker scripts. The actors are all good. There's no debating that. I don't feel the script is all that great, though. It did have fair reviews, but Haley Mills has said that this is the worst of her Disney films, and I happen to agree with Haley Mills on this one. In 1963, a movie called The Incredible Journey came out, and it was about 2 dogs and a Siamese cat staying with a family friend, and then they get lost. And it truly is an incredible journey. This film pops up on the AFI Top 100 Cheers list. I don't know if I put it on that list, but all right. The next film is called Sword in the Stone, and also came out in 1963. Animated feature, had mixed reviews. It was easily the worst reviewed movie that Disney had made, or worst reviewed animated feature that Disney had made to this point. And it did make $22 million, but compare that to 30 years earlier what Snow White made, which was almost 10 times that. But it depicts young King Arthur being trained by Merlin. This is really my least favorite of the animated films to this point, and I think most people would probably agree with me. But the next film, I definitely enjoy thoroughly. And here again, we're going to talk about my podcast guest, Michael McGreevey, For the Love of Willadine. This was just a fun film, and I remember watching it as a child and liking it so much. I liked it when I was about 12 years old, 13 maybe. Let's call it 13. And I really identified with JD, Michael McGreevey's character. I really could identify with him. But Bill Mumy is in this movie. Plays the little brother again, and he is insanely funny in the film. He's just absolutely hysterical, Bill Mumy, and it's funny to hear him complain so incessantly about Willadine. Oh, no, not Willadine. No, JD, played by Michael McGreevey, and Harley, played by Roger Mobley, are battling with each other for, of course, the love of Willadine. And that's the name of the movie. John Anderson plays Willadine's father, who was cantankerous and fiercely protective of his watermelon patch. JD and Freddie innocently, and I say the word innocently because they thought they thought that was okay. We're just taking a watermelon. He's got plenty of watermelon. That old man's got lots of watermelon. But they took a lot of his watermelons, and they just thought it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad to do that. But it had a touching scene involving Willadine's dad, when he realizes that the boys, he didn't know who did it, but he realizes that someone stole his prized watermelon. Just a fun film with terrific acting by the 5 main cast members, and all did a fantastic job. Just really fun. And I gotta say, Edwin again. I am so mad at myself for not asking Michael McGreevey while I had him on the phone, what was it like working with Edwin? He has just an absolutely marvelously sweet role in this film. He's just absolutely lovely. And I'm not going to spoil it. This movie is available. I caught it on. It's not available on Disney Plus, but if you scroll through YouTube a little bit and type in For the Love of Willadine, you might find it. Just saying. But it is a fun movie. I really enjoy it, and I think you should enjoy it too. And definitely want to check out the Edwin character. Just so classic. Just love him. Then that's followed up by A Tiger Walks in 1964. It also stars Brian Keith. Maybe I'll give an exception to A Tiger Walks. Brian Keith does a really good job in this movie. I'll go ahead and say that. But Vera Miles is also in the film. And by the way, Vera Miles is 91 years old. And you would recognize her from The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and The Searchers, John Wayne movies. Pamela Franklin was also in the film. She'd go on to be kind of a horror movie specialist. The film also starred Sabu, a man that was in a lot of movies earlier, prior to this. He played a tiger trainer that is approached by some ridiculous man. And this is the one thing about the plot that's just absolutely crazy is this man is taunting a tiger ridiculously. Why does he hate this tiger so much? I don't get it. But the tiger escapes, gets on the streets. I'm not spoiling anything. It happens in the beginning. But I just want to know, why is he so mean? Well, watch this film and answer me. Why is he so mean? Is there something I'm missing? This is a good movie to watch. It is mostly a drama, but it's got some really good scenes in it. It brought home $1.5 million. Not a huge money maker for Disney, but it is a good movie. Let's see. The next film we'll talk about is called The Misadventures of Merlin Jones. Came out in 1964. Tommy Kirk, Annette Funicello, and Leon Ames. Through an accident, Merlin can suddenly hear people's thoughts. It eventually leads to trouble with a judge. And this is a fun movie for sure. I give it 3 stars out of 4. I want to give it 4 stars, but it's not perfect. The gags could have been just a little better, could have been more fun. The premise is fantastic, and the idea was great, and the delivery was equally great. It's a fun movie, really fun, and I definitely recommend it. But it lacks that huge, hilarious scene, the way like Sammy the Without Seal had. Let's see. But it is a fun movie for sure, and definitely recommend. Let's see. The next film was called The 3 Lives of Thomasina, and this film stars Karen Detrice, who is just absolutely just sparkling. Such a sweet young girl, and it also stars Patrick McGowan, who has a long IMDb list, usually playing a villain or somebody who's cantankerous, and also Susan Hampshire. Let's see, Karen Detrice is the adorable little girl whose father, played by Patrick McGowan, is a cold veterinarian. He's widowed and he's bitter, and Susan Hampshire plays the love interest that attempts to soften the doctor. Thomasina is the cat in the middle of the story, but this is definitely good. Definitely worth a watch. But the next film we're going to talk about is called The Moon Spinners. The Moon Spinners, 1964, starring Haley Mills, and she plays Nikki Ferris, and also stars Joan Greenwood as her mother, and Peter McKinney is in it. Look for Eli Wallach in the villainous role, and Eli Wallach shows us a little bit of what you're going to see a couple years later with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Just a mean jerk. A little better dressed, though. Paula Negri, of all people, is in this movie. This was her final screen performance, and she comes on this movie 2 decades out of retirement, and somehow Walt pulls her in to do one more role, and it is a memorable one. This film, it has Nikki and her mother, Haley Mills, and Joan Greenwood. They take a leisurely trip to Crete, but it becomes a stressful misadventure involving several people who are unwilling to let on even what's going on. What are they even looking for? What is this all about? And it's about jewels. The film resembles a Hitchcock effort. It got good reviews. Haley Mills, of course, is great. And again, Eli Wallach, really, really great as the villain. And Paula Negri, who was, if you don't know who Paula Negri was, she's also a silent film star. So she delivers one terrific line.
Through 2 wars, 4 revolutions, and 5 marriages. Nothing like this.
The Moonspenders did really well at the box office. A little mixed bag with the critics. It's definitely worth a watch, and the principal actors are really terrific in it, and it is a lot of fun to see Paula Negri on the screen, and be able to kind of connect to the old Hollywood. But the next film we'll talk about is called Emil and the Detectives. This is made in 1964. A fun film shot in Germany. It's about a boy who has to deliver money to his grandmother. Well, he doesn't get it there because a thief sneaks it out of his pocket, and the boy ends up hiring another boy to try to help him find it. And it's based on the novel by Eric Kostner. But fun film. And lastly, we will talk about a movie you might have heard of. It's called Mary Poppins, a 1964 musical starring Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins, Dick Van Dyke as Bert, Karen Dotrice, and Matthew Garber, David Tomlinson, Glynis Johns, Arthur Treacher, Jane Darwell, and Ed Wynn. Let's see. Let's talk about the characters. Mary Poppins is, of course, perfect in every way. That's what she says. And Bert is played by Dick Van Dyke. And what he really nails that British accent, doesn't he? Well, maybe not so much, but it's hard to imagine Mary Poppins without Dick Van Dyke, and he does perform admirably in this film. It just, his accent goes, it comes and goes a little bit, that's all. Karen Dotrice and Matthew Garber are just delightful as the children, and you probably already know this anyway, but David Tomlinson plays George Banks. And is George really the actual protagonist in this film? Something to think about. Just something to think about. Is he the real character in the film that is the guy that the movie's really about? Just something to think about. And then we've got Glynis Johns, who played Mrs. Banks, who in the beginning of the film is a real strong woman, and somehow she becomes very submissive. But I think that it's possible that Mr. Banks was just so dominant by nature. It was be difficult to be anything but. Otherwise, you just completely be at a loss of how to deal with him, because he was set in his ways. But then, the film is almost like Mary Poppins herself, and perfect in every way. I mean, they're if you want to talk about the music from Mary Poppins, let's talk about some of the songs. Sister Suffragette, sung by Glynis Johns. She, again, makes herself out to be a really strong female character. Well done, a fun song. But it was followed by the song The Perfect Nanny, who is mostly sung by Karen Dotrice, and she talks about what kind of nanny the kids want. And Matthew Garber during the scene is just adorable. He's just fun. Followed by another song, A Spoonful of Sugar, which we all know. You can sing it right now. And it's true in life. If you have a little something to sweeten something bad that, it's rotten, it makes it not be so bad. And the kids actually liked the taste of their medicine. It's supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Say that 5 times and see what I give you for a prize. No, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, sung during their time in the park in the animated sequence. And we all know that song too. Then we have Stay Awake, which how many parents out there do we have who have tried to psych their kids out and going to sleep? And that's exactly what Mary Poppins is doing with the song Stay Awake. And reverse psychology. And then, of course, the great Ed Wynn. Oh boy, how do you not love Ed Wynn? I swear, I love to laugh. That's the name of the song. But yeah, it's, to me, I think it's just ranks right up there with one of the funniest scenes in not just a Disney movie, but any movie. It's just so funny. And I remember watching the movie as a child in the movie theater, just absolutely laughing hysterically. And it's just fun. But the film takes a little bit more of a serious turn with the song Feed the Birds. And it kind of depicts the attitude of, hey, take care of people that need your help, rather than worry so much about what the children's father worries about, which is money, money, money. Which leads it to the next movie, or the next song called Fidelity Fiduciary Bank, where the bankers explain to the children how banking works. And it was also followed up by a song that everybody knows, Chim Chim Cheree. Everybody knows that song, which is followed by another song called Step in Time, which just, just a fantastic song and fantastic choreography. But of course, the film ends with the song Let's Go Fly a Kite. And, how do you not love these songs? And how do they not remind you of your childhood? That's just fantastic stuff. But Mary Poppins, in some ways, could be considered like the apex of the Disney franchise. It may very well be the cornerstone. Pretty much, I think it might be the best live-action Disney film that there ever was. I'm going to let everybody else be the judge of that, but I kind of believe that. 100% Rotten Tomatoes score, and all the scenes hit, and all the songs hit. So everything that was kind of wrong with, in my opinion, Baby in the Toyland was right with Mary Poppins. Just a fantastic movie. And this was Karen Detrice's second of two appearances as in a Disney film, and she would though reappear 6 decades later almost in Mary Poppins Returns, and it's my understanding that she lives in the UK now. Matthew Garber unfortunately died when he was only 21 years old of pancreatitis. Sad story. Julie Andrews, of course, is still with us. She's 85, and Dick Van Dyke is 94. Glynis Johns is 97. And then we have David Thompson, who played George Banks, who's been gone for a long time, but has a long IMDb list. But again, think about, are the children the main characters, or is it Mary Poppins, or is it the children's father? Who is the real true protagonist in this movie? The one you cheer for. And I kind of think it is him. But then again, I'll let you be the judge. But Mary Poppins is legendary, and there's absolutely no denying that. And in a lot of ways, that's how people, one of the first things that pops in people's heads when they think of Disney film lore. The film, of course, would spawn a sequel over 50 years later called Mary Poppins Returns, which came after a movie called Saving Mr. Banks, which is definitely worth a look. And we'll talk about both of those movies in a future podcast. And right now we're chronicling all of the Disney films. And we are up to 1964. And what a legacy Walt Disney has created to this point. And, it will continue into the next podcast that we have about the Disney one. I'm compiling that now, and that'll be out in a few months. But definitely enjoy talking about all these films, and probably particularly Mary Poppins, probably particularly Ed Wynn. And thanks again very much to Michael McGreevey for appearing on the show. He has enhanced this episode greatly with his fun insight about Walt and about working for Walt Disney. And we will approach Michael McGreevey again in the next podcast, because he happened to be in some other movies starring Kurt Russell. So he wasn't done with Disney. He went on into the 70s and performed in films. But thanks so much for listening to Cinema Chat with David Heath. And I am your humble host. My name is David Heath. And we appreciate you listening today. And this is the podcast where we talk about the movies and the people that made them.